Hello friends, welcome to my channel again. So today we're going to talk about a rich text editor, right? So this is one of the things that you might be interested in implementing in your web application that you're building, and you want to have a way where users can be able perhaps to write some post and post your website, or yourself you want to be able to write a blog post, right, and be able to publish those blog posts, right? So you need some sort of a text editor that you can be able to edit the text richly, right? You can be able to make the text bold, underline, italics, or code, or show other properties that you're interested in here, right? So this is the project we're going to do today. You can see on my home route here, localhost 3000, I have a component where it's like a form, right, where I can be able to type in a title as well as a description, and in the description I can actually be able to edit my text as I type in. So let's just quickly do a demo and say this is a new post, right, 2024, let's say September, right, something like that, September, something like that, and let's just write some text here as we go, right? Let's just quickly write some text, right? And now let's format our text. The first line, let's make it a bold. The second line, let's make it underline, and let's make italics, and perhaps let's make it an ordered list, and this one it will be an ordered list, right? And for example, let's stroke out this one, and let's say for example we made a mistake. We can actually do an undo here, right? You can see everything's working, right? So when we hit submit, right, all the information should be able to be sent to the database, and if it's successful, should be directed to the /post route. On the /post route, you can be able to see all the posts that we have actually edited, right? You're not able to see the post that I just edited right now because of caching with Next.js. I'm using Next.js here, so I'm going to quickly do a hard refresh, right? Refresh on my post here, and I'll do it a couple of times so that we can be able to see that new post that I just edited now, right? So on this post here, you can be able to view an individual post. For example, if I click on view, I'll be redirected to this URL, which is a dynamic route, right? And you can be able to see a single post, right? And all the text that we've just written is actually showing here, right? You can go back again to the post, and for example, let's say I want to be able to edit this one, right? Instead of saying title xz, I can say this is an edited post, just like that, right? And if I hit submit, you should be able to communicate with my database, and you can see there is an edited post here, right? Okay, so this is the post that I just created earlier on, right? And you can see I also have the last modified, right? Shows us like when was this post last modified. So this is something that you want to have in your website, or you want to have your own blog post, right? You can have something like this. So I'm going to show you how we can do this, and we're going to use a library called Tiptap, right? I think it's a great library in my opinion, right? It's easy to integrate. You can use some customizations there, and it comes with a lot of extensions, right? So these are the extensions where you can be able to do a lot of things, like for example upload images, for example add on YouTube, right? And a lot of things. You can go on the documentation and you can be able to see everything that you're looking for, right? Okay, all right, so we are using Next.js, right, to build this. So Next.js, we're using Next.js, and we're going to follow this quick documentation of Next.js, right? Then on the database, we're going to use Neon serverless, right? The Neon serverless database, where we can be able to post our data and be able to save it. We can be able to create and be able to retrieve it from our database, right? Easy to implement, easy to sort out, right? And for the UI, we're going to be using shardcn, right? And on shardcn, we're going to specifically focus on the form, right? The form component. That's what we're going to focus on, right? So to get started, what you just need to do, go on my repo, right? On my repo, rich text editor, and make sure you just git clone that repo, right? So for example, you can just navigate where you want to have your project onto. For example, I'm inside my music directory here, right? So what I can do, I can initialize a gish bash here, right? And I'll just quickly type git clone, then I paste in that URL from that git, right? See, it's cloning, right? Once it's done cloning, I'll just cd into rich text, right? Rich text editor, just like that. Okay, once I'm inside there, then I just need to git checkout starter, right? Git checkout starter. You can see I'm now in the new branch called starter, and if you open your integrated terminal from there, you should be able to see the starter code, right? So I'm just going to open my code editor using this command git space period, then I hit enter. I'm going to open my code editor and you can start building now, right? Cool. Right, I've opened my code editor in Visual Studio Code. I'm using Visual Studio Code here, right? And you can see everything is clean, right? My layouts.tsx, everything is clean. My page, I just have this component with the section tag element here, right? And with the CSS classes, right? And also in my components folder, I have a pre-built header component that I just built already, and also a loading button, right? And then the libs, there's just this, right, that we get from shardcn, right? So before we proceed, let's look into the package.json, right? In our package.json, you can see there's a lot of dependencies. Some of them, they come with shardcn UI, right? Like for example, these radix, all these radix, they come with shardcn UI, and the hook form as well comes shardcn UI, right? Then some of them that I just edit, for example, is your Drizzle and also a Tiptap, the extension, and the Tiptap PM, Tiptap React Starter Kit, right? And also Drizzle, DJS, and HTML parser, right? These ones I've edited, right? Make sure you've got your package.json, which looks like mine, right? And run npm install so that you have, you know, the node modules and all the dependencies installed on your local machine, right? Okay, so we're going to use Drizzle ORM, right, to interact with your Neon database, right? So for example, if I just quickly go onto Drizzle, right, let's say for example Drizzle ORM with Neon database, there's a tutorial there on how you can actually be able to integrate, you know, your Drizzle ORM with Neon database, and the whole code is there. You're going to see later on when we're going to add our DB folder here and all the other code implementation. I just got it exactly from here, right? Okay, cool. Right, so once I have that, once you have that, you also need to have your env.local with this URL that you get from Drizzle, from Neon rather, right? You need to populate it there, right? Okay, so once that is out of the way, if you run your project on your local machine after installing the dependencies, and if you run your project on local machine, you should be able to see a rich text editor which looks like mine, right? So let's go into the Tiptap documentation, right, and see how we can implement this, right? So if we go to the all docs and go to the editor, and we need to see in the installation, right? For example, installation, we are building our project with Next.js. So let's just tap into a Next.js. We've already done this, right? And install these dependencies, right? This is how we can do it. We can create a component, right? Inside components and say, and add this code here, right? So I'm just gonna quickly do that, right? I'm just gonna quickly do that. Go in my components, and inside here, I'm just gonna create a new component called add post, right? Add post, just like that. .tsx, TSX. I'm using TypeScript, but if you are comfortable with JavaScript, you can just follow along, right? And let me just say hit save right here, right? And the name of this is going to be called add post, actually, not Tiptap. Add post. Same applies here. Hit save, right? And let me go in my page dot tsx, my home route, right? And add that post here, right? Let me close the tag like that. Make sure you import it nicely, right? Okay, let's import it and let's hit save. Once you hit save, and if we refresh, we should be able to see a component here which looks like this implementation that we do have here, right? Exactly, right? So just refreshing again, what we're going to be using is Next.js, Tailwind CSS. For the database, we're going to use Neon, serverless, cloud-based, database, which is a Postgres under the hood, right? And we're gonna use the UI, especially the React hook form. Short.cn actually shows us how to do that here, right? They show us how to do that, everything here, right? We're gonna implement exactly or something closer to this what they just did here, right? And for the ORM to generate our SQL for us, we're going to be using Drizzle ORM, right? But our main focus is just to build a rich text editor, not emphasizing on how to set up Neon or the database and all sorts of things, right? Okay, cool, right? So that is fully initialized. You can see now there is a text editor which just looks like this, right? Cool. Let's proceed to the next step. So we've successfully imported our add posts component inside our home page here, right? And we can see the text that is shown here. Like for example, it says hello world, right? It shows here, right? So this is the example that we're following here for how to implement it in Next.js, right? And you can see it's a text input here. We can actually be able to populate some of other code here, like, right? Okay, cool. So let's make this now more professional so that it can be able to be shown nicely on our UI, right? Where the user can be able to navigate on the text editor menu bar and be able to select either the bold, underline, or italics, right? So let's quickly get to look in the documentation. For example, this was a simple demonstration of how you can use Tiptap with Next.js, right? Let's go into, for example, the formatting examples, right? For example, you can see this is a complete basic editor, right? You can see it's got a menu bar here, right? On top, you can be able to highlight this, for example, and make it an H2, just like that. You see? Cool. Or you can be able to select this and maybe make it strike. We can strike it like that. Okay, so this is a menu bar and this is the text that you're actually editing, right? Okay, let's quickly look into how they're implementing it, right? You can see there is a menu bar that they are creating here, right? And it takes in a prop of an editor, right? So if the editor is available, or if the editor is successfully mounted, we can show this div. Otherwise, we can just return now, right? And we are importing all these other, either properties, functions from Tiptap, and also maybe some extensions as well, right? That are not available in the starter kit, right? Okay, good. So on the menu bar, it's actually buttons, right? It's actually button, and if you click on it, so you have an on-click handler. If you click on it, you want the editor to do something, right? So this editor is an instance that you create actually. So from that instance, if you click this button, then you can run these other methods here, right? You can run those other methods. So we want to have on our project that we're doing, we need to have a menu bar like this. So we need to have a menu bar, right? And also the text input itself. So the text input will be this editor content, right? So we have a menu bar and editor content, right? So on the editor content, you can see it's actually an instance of the editor, right? And we are making use of the use editor here, right? And the use editor actually takes in some properties like your extensions. You can specify which extensions you want to use, right? And also the content, right? So this is the content. It can either be, you know, an empty string, or it can be populated with some pre-filled content like what just happened here, right? So we want to make something like this, right? So how can we do that? Right, we'll quickly go into our text editor soon, right? So we're going to create a custom menu on our side, custom menu where we can be able to, you know, that take a menu bar, we can be able to create it using some icons, right? Make use of icons that we're going to get from React icons, right? So that's the library that's available in, you know, also your package.json. Give that dependency as well, like React icons library, this one, right? Exactly, right? Then once we've done that, we just quickly look into some of the things we can do on the editor as well, right? The instance we're going to create. So for example, we're going to make use of Tailwind CSS. So we're going to tap into the editor props, attributes, the class, and we can just make use of our, you know, Tailwind CSS so that, you know, it can show nicely on the UI, right? So without wasting much time, let's go ahead now and implement what we just talked about here, right? So instead of having this in our add post, we actually need to make use of React hook form, right? We need to make use of React hook form, right? But before we do that, we'll need to create the rich text editor component itself, right? So inside components, inside here, let's create something called rich text editor. That's the name of the component, right? Rich text editor, right? Okay, good. So let's quickly go ahead and do that. So inside components, let's create another component called rich text editor.tsx, just like that. Then let's initialize it, RFC, just like that. Okay, RFC, just like that. So that's a rich text editor, right? And now we need to import the use editor, just like what we are seeing here, just like what we are seeing here, right? We need to import use editor and the editor content. So we need that from Tiptap React, right? We also need starter kit, right? Exactly. And some extensions that we might need, we need them there, right? Okay, so let me quickly import that. So for the sake of time, I'm going to import that. It's basically following this guideline, right? But we're going to make it in our own way, right? And inside here now we need that text editor now, right? So our text editor, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be a reusable component. So as a reusable component, we're going to be using it on the add posts and any other section that we might need it, right? So we need to define some props, right? It will take in some props, this component. So these are the props that it will take. We're going to call them text editor props. It's going to take an onChange function and initial content, right? So the initial content that we're talking about is basically this, right? That we can specify in the use editor here. Some of the properties or props that are taken here that can be taken by the use editor, right? So these are the that's the initial content, right? Okay, cool. So once we are done with that, let's just now specify on here to say this particular component is actually getting hold of props, right? Which are text editor props, just like that. So let's just destructure them and specify it like that, right? Then inside here now, we now need to initialize our editor, right? So this is an instance. Let's go and look into the documentation for the editor instance, right? So on the editor instance, the saying is a central building block of Tiptap. It does most of the heavy lifting, right? Such as creating the editor view, right? So that's what we are going to do right here, to instantiate the editor, right? So we're going to say const, right? So we're going to follow something like this. Const editor equals use editor, and we specify the extensions and other properties that we need here, right? So let's just say const editor, right? Const editor. Const editor is equals to use editor, right? Use editor that we get from Tiptap React, right? And inside we specify some properties, right? So the extensions, as for the extensions, we need to make use of the starter kit extension, right? So let's go on the documentation, right? Let's go on the documentation and let's just search for starter kit extension, right? So the starter kit extension includes these nodes: the block code, the bullet, code block, document, all these, and also the marks are these, right? Exactly. So what we're basically trying to say here is that you get to access these properties here. So this is a starter extension where you can be able to do things like, you know, bold, italic, strike, and also all the other things, right? So that's what we mean by starter kit extension, right? So in the use editor, we can specify, say, extensions. You can see those props extensions. Then we can specify the extensions as an array, right? We're going to make use of the starter kit extension, and we can actually integrate the underline as well. So this one you need to manually add it as part of your dependencies, right? You need to edit as a part of your dependencies with this version of Tiptap, right? Just like that. And also for content now, for content, what we are doing, it's because we are using this as a reusable component. So this content that we specify here is actually the initial content, just like that, right? Then the next thing we can do, there's also a function that you can get here. So we need an on update function. On update, right? On update, what are we going to do? On update, we're going to tell the editor, right? We're going to tell the editor like this. We're going to destructure and tell the editor, right? Just like that, and say, once you get out of the editor, whenever there's an on change, right? Whenever there's an on change, just like that, then we need to say editor get HTML, right? So Tiptap, the content that you type is actually HTML under the hood. It's vanilla HTML, right? Yes. So they've specified that in their documentation, like they don't deal with Markdown, but rather, you know, it's HTML because of some reasons, right? Okay, so we can say get HTML just like that. Okay, cool. And next on the list, we can now tap into the editor props, right, where we can be able to manipulate our styling. If you can see on our code editor, it's just something which is not user friendly. It doesn't give a good user experience, and also the UI is kind of ugly. So we need to change this height of this, you know, input, text input, right? We need to change the height and also the styling of it, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to tap into editor props, right? Editor props, and let's get access to the attributes, right? So let's open curly brackets. Let's get access to the attributes, right? Attributes, and attributes, we're going to get access to the class, right? The class, this class, right? And for class now, we now need to add our own class. Yeah, right. So this is going to be Tailwind CSS classes, right, that we're going to be adding here, right? So let me get hold of those Tailwind CSS classes, right, from the completed project, and let me just paste them here, just like that. Cool, right? Then lastly, what we can be able to do now is actually make sure like we have this, right? You can see it. If you don't edit, you can see like a Tiptap will giving you an error in your console integrated terminal to tell you that you need to have this, right? It has to do with, you know, server side of rendering or versus client side of rendering, right? So you just need to edit that. Okay, so once you have that out of the way, you now need to, let's quickly go into the documentation, right? So this is basically what happened here when you're creating the editor, right? You have extensions and content and other, you know, properties there, right? So you just now need to say to now return a div here, right? So we need to return a div, right? And inside the div, we're now going to return the editor, right? Editor content, and we pass in editor, just like what they did here, right? So let's just copy that and paste it there. So editor content that we get from Tiptap/React, and we pass the property of the editor, just like that. Cool, right? So let me comment out this for now. We haven't created that component, right? Let me create that, and let's refresh here, right? Once we refresh, we should be able to see a nice looking text input field here, right? Cool. Okay, we're still seeing the previously added input field. It's because our rich text editor, it's actually a single field, right? So what we need to do now, in our edit post, we need to change this code, right? We need to change this code. So let me close some of these, right? Let me close some of these things. In our edit post, we need to change what you're seeing to actually be able to see a form actually, right? So before we do that, to add a form as well, let me just quickly import the header inside our layout.tsx, as well as a toaster, right, that we get from shardcn, right? So let me quickly go and grab that. So we need a header and a toaster, just like that. Okay, so here let me put a header and a toaster. Make sure you import those, right? So the header is coming from the components /header, and the toaster is coming from shardcn UI, components UI /toaster, just like that. Hit save. We should be able to see a home link and a post link here, right? Cool. So while that's loading, then let's proceed to the next step. We said we need to change this code that's in here so that it can display our text editor that we just implemented right now. So for the sake of time, let me just quickly go and grab the code that I have already, right? So I'll grab that code and come and put it inside here, right? Come and put it inside here, right? And hit save, right? So this is our edit post, right? Okay, cool. Let's quickly analyze this code before we fix all these other errors, right? Right, so you can see I'm making use of this import, like your Zod resolver, you use form from here to form, and also the form itself from shardcn UI, the input, the toaster, and our custom made rich text editor, right? Right, the only things that we don't have here is actually these validations from lib and also these server actions, right? Let me quickly go and grab those and bring them here. So we need to have a validations file inside our lib, right? And we also need to have the actions file inside our app, just like that. Okay, cool. So once we have that, what else is missing? right? I think I just need to import them manually, right? So that I don't have a complaint like that. Okay. All right, I imported everything here, right? Like your post schema from validations and create posts. The other thing as well is that in my server actions, I don't have Drizzle and schema, right? I don't have Drizzle from DB and schema. So I'll quickly grab those as well, right? Remember, the emphasis of this course, of this tutorial, is not on how to set up your DB, but rather how to, set up your rich text editor, right? So I'm gonna grab the DB directory or folder, right? And let's just copy it into here so that I can get access to Drizzle. There we go, right? So we have a form on the home route, which is basically a title. You can be able to edit title and the description here, right? Okay, but one thing that you notice, we don't have the menu bar for the text editor here, right? And because we've used Tailwind CSS, you can see even the height is actually of a reasonable length or height, right? And there's, if I focus on it, there's this nice black focus ring, right? Okay, let's proceed. We will now need to have the menu bar on top here, right? Let's quickly look at the documentation, right? So on formatting, right, you can use formatting. We need to have this menu bar which looks like this, something similar to this, right? And you can see the menu bar that they've created here. It takes in a prop of an editor, right? And it just retain a couple or a bunch of buttons, right? Or this is just buttons with those buttons. So on each on the editor instance, there is these methods here, right? These methods here, right? Like just like that. So you can see, for example, if it's a strike button, right, you can just say on click function dot chain dot focus dot to strike dot run, and the class name, right? The class name, if this is a boolean, if the editor is active, the strike, right, you do some is active, you can put a class what you want to see, otherwise put an empty string, just like that. So this is basically what you're going to follow, right? So let's quickly go now to our editor, and inside components, we want to create another component now that we're going to add to our rich text editor component, right? So for that, we can just call it text editor menu bar, or simply menu bar, right? So I'm gonna call it text editor menu bar, so that I can be able to know in the future, like this is actually the text editor menu bar, right? .tsx, just like that. Okay, cool, right? So what do we need, right? Our text editor, we need to just make it more dynamic, more reusable, right? So we're going to import some icons, right, from React hook icons, and we need to get hold of the editor type as well, or the editor type, right? So let's import all these icons from React icons, and also need to import the editor from Tiptap React, right? Once you've done that, we need to create a component that we can map through, right? Just one component, or sub component actually, called button, right? So we just say const button, it needs to have these properties, right? And also the children, right? And these are the types. The on click will be a function, right? The is active will be a boolean, the disabled will be a boolean. So what we need to do is just basically this here, right? We need a way of making it more readable, more reusable, right? Exactly. Cool. So on that component, what we're going to do, we're now creating the main component, right, which is the text editor menu bar, right? So the text editor menu bar will look like this, right? To look like this, it will be a function, right? So these, I can actually cut these from here. From now I can cut these and just put them maybe at the top here. Yeah, at the top here, and let me just minimize them. So these are actually these buttons here as on the documentation, right? This is basically what I'm doing as on the documentation, right? But instead, on the list of those buttons, right, I'm actually, you know, I'm actually getting hold of the icon, the on click function. There is active as well, right? Okay, now you can be able to see. I'll just put it back where I got it, right? Put it back inside this text editor, right? So the main component now is called text editor menu. It gets a prop, which is editor, right? And the type also of the editor that we get from Tiptap React, right? And inside we have got a list or an array, right, of buttons properties, right? Buttons properties. I just say const buttons, right? Yeah, exactly. And what we're going to do, we're going to just return a div, and the div will be, the buttons will be flags, right? And we're going to map over this sub component that we've created, which takes in a key of index, right? Then an on click function, and the boolean is active as well as disabled, and as a children we give it an icon, right? So once we have that component, right, once we have this component here, right, created like that, we now need to import it inside the rich text editor, right? So just here on top here, just like that, and let's close it like that, right? Let's make sure like we import it exactly as we want it, just like that. All right, and if we refresh here, we should be able to see a menu bar on top here. So let's refresh. Once that is happening under the hood, basically I need to pass in a prop, right? Editor prop here. So I will just say editor is goes to editor, editor instance here, right? Let me hit save, right? And let me refresh again, right? So once that is refreshing, let's quickly take a look at what we just did here, right? So first of all, we've created a component, reusable component called rich text editor, right? And we follow the documentation. Following the documentation, we can see we can initialize an instance of the editor, and we can make use of the use editor where we can tap into properties, right, that we can pass in depending on what you want to see on our text editor, right? We need extensions, either starter kit, these are default extensions like your bold, underline, italics, and ordered list, right? And also you can put the underline. Sorry, underline is not included on the starter kit, right? You have to manually edit it, yeah. And also pass in the content and update function, and we can also tap into the editor props, right? Right, once we've done that, we need to return now the editor content, which is a text input that shows you what you're actually typing out, right? Right, so it's not enough for you to have an editor where you cannot be able to see ways to toggle, ways to click a button that can make something bold or something italic, right? So for that, we've created a separate component, right, that we can just plug into this main component, right? And that one is a menu bar. So a menu bar, it's basically the way we did it. It's a way that makes it more readable, our code more readable, right? So what we're doing, we're actually following this documentation here, right? We're following this documentation where we can make each button, we can add each button to the menu bar, right? So for us, we've just separated some of the content and created a list that we can map over our button, right? Each and every button gets an on click, right? And also gets this boolean which is active or the button is disabled, right? So this is how we created it, right? So once we have that and we have refreshed, you can see now we have this menu bar and our text editor here, right? Everything is working fine and perfect, right? Okay, cool. So let's quickly now go to add the post, right? And our add post here, right? Instead of invoking this server action, let me comment it out and let me just try to log what the values that we are actually inputting in our code editor here, right? In our rich text editor, right? So let me just log the values here, right? Then let me just type some random things here. Right, let me hit submit. Once I hit submit, let me just check now in my inspect, in my React, in my browser dev tools, right? In the console, and let's see what you're able to get back, right? Okay, nothing as yet. Let me hit submit again, right? On submit, you can see now it's actually an object, right, where I have the title and the description, and you can see the description is actually a string of raw HTML, right? Of raw HTML, right? So we now need a way of being able to read this, right? First of all, before we read, let's now finalize our server actions, right? So that we can be able to send our data to the database and be able to store it there and find a way of retrieving it, right? So I'll just uncomment this for now. Right, uncomment and save, right? Okay, let's look in our server actions. In our server actions, we're actually getting hold of the DB from Drizzle, right? So here's our DB folder. I already populated the migrations for you, right? You don't need to worry about those migrations. To run the migrations, what you just need to push this into your database, right? If you're following this tutorial, right? Okay, so I have my Drizzle here. If you go into Drizzle ORM, like what we have here, right? Like what we have here, that's exactly what I followed, right? How to set up your Drizzle, how to create a schema, right? And how to export types, and also how to perform some queries. These are the migrations that have been, you know, this is the Drizzle generate. This is the SQL that has been generated. Then you can write migrate and push the database. Then you can be able to run some queries. So that's basically what I just followed, right? Once you have followed that, you can now see that's exactly what I just did here, right? Then we can be able to invoke create posts, right? Let me add this. It's like it was not imported nicely. Okay, so it's going to import from actions, right? And if I invoke that, remember I have my database URL in my env.local file here, right? So if I'm able now to run this server action, I should be able to interact with my Neon database, right? I'm not gonna go into setting up Neon database. That's simple, straightforward to follow, right? Okay, right. So the way my server actions are is that if everything goes well here, I should be able to be redirected to a post URL, right? So I don't have that URL as yet. So I'm gonna grab it and bring it inside my app directory, just like that. Okay, cool. Just gonna be brought here. Okay, so that means that if now I go on my rich text editor and let me try to write some random things, just here like that, this should be added into my database and I should be redirected to the post route. So I'll hit submit. If everything goes well, I should be redirected to the post route, right? Let me just maximize this and let's see that in action. All right, that has been submitted, and immediately I'm redirected to the post route, right? But you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 posts here that are being shown. If I go into my Neon database right now, in my Neon database, I should be able to see more items, right? Should be able to see more items. Let me wait for it to refresh. Right, you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items. So what's happening with the rest that I just added, which is this one and this one, right? So Next.js has got some caching issues here, right? What I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit hard refresh here, right? So Command 5 on a Mac or Control F5 on a Windows machine, right? Okay, I should be able to see a new post that I just added just right here, right? Good. All right, so while that is fetching, there we are. We've got the other post here. There we go. While that is out of the way, let's now look into the rest of the code, right? So the rest of the code is just simple, right? In our add posts component, I would like to show you something that we're doing with the form, React hook form, right? We've got default values that we have here. It's an empty string, right? But now if I go on the post, there's also a component called edit posts. Edit posts is similar like add posts, right? But the difference is that we are getting a hidden input here, which is an ID that we want to use in our server actions to change whatever we want to change based on that ID, right? And the rest is the same. The rest is the same, like a loading button and your rich text editor is the same, right? But the default values now, we're actually getting a prop, and those props, we say the default value for the title will be post.title description, post.description, and ID. We'll make sure like it's a string for now, right? It's a string. We need to stringify it so that we can be able to play around it, right? But when we go into our server actions, we'll change that string again to a number, right? Because in our database, we actually, adding an ID as a number, right? So that's basically it, right? Okay, cool. All right, so we have everything set up. There's one file that is missing that I need to add here, just to make sure like there's a complete it's a complete code that I'm going to submit on GitHub, right? So we just need this drizzle.config.ts, right? Okay, so that's basically how to make our code editor, right? So on the post route, I can be able to fetch all the posts from the database just like this. I can be able to fetch them and map them over a postcard that I just created as well. So this is the postcard that shows each and every post with a dummy image here, and it shows the post title, the slug to view. This is a link actually to be able to view a singular post, or else you can have a way to edit a post. And it also shows when was this post modified, when last was it modified. And for that, I'm using the extension, or rather the package called date.js, right? And I'm extending it with what you call relative time, right? Okay, cool. So that's basically everything that we need for this, right? So let's go and see if everything is working on our code, right? So we do have 10 posts, and let me just try to edit this, right? If I click on it, there'll be a sheet that shows and says, let me edit that and say this, then this is edited for real, right? If I click submit, that should be able to be submitted, and you should be able to see a change on the title here. You can see there's a change on the title. There is a change on the title, right? So basically that's how you see I've shown you how to create a post, save it into the database, retrieve it from the database, right? Retrieve it from the database, or the post retrieved from the database, and be able to view all those posts, right? There's one thing I need to make known to you, right, before we proceed, right? Let me go to the posts, right, to create a post, right? I'm just going to create a random post, just like that, right? And now let me make this a list, right? You see, I took it a list, right? It's actually a list, but it doesn't show that styling that comes with the list. And this, let me make it an ordered list as well. You can see it doesn't show me those, either a decimal or a disk here, right? So for that, if I inspect my code, right, my HTML code, right, if I inspect it like that, go to the body, and let's go to, where should I go, header section, right, let me go to section, let me go to this form, let me go to this div, right, this is the description. Actually need to go to this, right, exactly this, you can see, right, this is my text editor, right, div, right? So on that text editor div, you can see there's actually an ordered list and an unordered list, and also some paragraphs here, right? Okay, good. There's a class name called prose mirror, right? So what I want to do, I want to tap into that prose mirror class and be able to manipulate some of the stylings with regards to an ordered list, right? An ordered list and ordered list as well. So what you can do, go to your global.css and tap into the prose mirror and make sure like you put some stylings, right? So this is custom CSS, right? Put some stylings and make sure like if it's an unordered list, it should show a list disk. If it's ordered, it should show list decimal, right? Okay, let's hit save, right? The reason is that Tailwind CSS actually, you know, removes all the default stylings on each and every element. So if you want to show that as a user types, you need to manually tap into prox mirror and be able to change that. You can see now there's a change now, right? You can see there's a change. You can be able to see this is a good user experience, right? If you want to read more about prose mirror, just go to the Tiptap documentation. You can be able to, you know, read more about it, right? Okay, so that's with regards to our rich text editor. Now let's go to the posts, right? All the posts, and now let's just view one of the posts, right? Okay, so from our database, we're actually saving this as rich text as a string. How can we be able now to display this on the UI so that it can be able to be shown nicely as it is with all those paragraphs just like that, right? For that, we're going to use what the dependency, which is called HTML React parser, right? So let's go into our single post, right? Into our single post. So in this route, which is a dynamic route, exactly inside the page. So inside this page, I'm just getting hold of a single post, right? I'm getting hold of a single post here, right? And I'm searching for that single post, right? If there's no post, I'll just say, you know, no post found, right? But now I'm going to use this package, this dependency called HTML React parser, right? Where I can be able to get that description or that raw HTML from my database, and I should be able to parse it just like that with some options and render it nicely onto the UI, right? So the options, what I'm doing with the options now, right? With the options, I'm replacing any unordered list with this custom ordered list of mine, right? So if the name of that DOM node is actually UL, replace it and give it this UL of mine and give it these classes here, right? So let's go to the documentation of React HTML. HTML React parser, right? HTML React parser. So on the documentation, you can be able to see how you can implement what I'm talking about, right? And let's just go to the GitHub, right? So on the GitHub here, you can see this is how you can import it, right? Then you can pass, right? So we are passing a string of raw HTML that we're getting from the database, right? So for us, it's basically our content, right? But now what you can be able to do, you can be able to make a replacement, right? So to replace, you get hold of this replace option that allows you to replace an element with another element, right? And you say replace, pass in DOM, then you can be able to replace what you want to see here, right? Since we're using TypeScript, we actually need these HTML React parser options, right? Make sure you import it from HTML React and also this element here, right? Then you can be able to do the rest of what I just did. So if you read this documentation on your own, you can be able to follow along now what I was just doing here, right? You can be able to follow along what I was just doing, right? So on my each and every HTML that I'm sending to the database, there's always a UL, there's always an OL, there's always a paragraph. You can add more custom replacements as you need here, just like that, right? But if you follow that, you can now be able to parse that string that is saved in the database, which is a description in our case, and pass in the options, and you can be able to show it nicely on the UI, just like what's happening here, right? Just like what's happening here, right? So ladies and gentlemen, this is it from start to finish, and also how you can be able to edit, create, edit, right? The only thing I didn't do is to actually delete, but this is basically all you need in terms of a rich text editor that you can use for your own application, right? Okay, thank you very much. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe, give me a star on GitHub. I'm actually going to make this rich text editor open source. We can be able to, put more features onto it so that other people can be able to use it, right? So thank you very much, and give me a thumbs up, follow me on YouTube, subscribe. Thank you so much.